Welcome to Practical Talk Time. I'm Sandy Wrobel, your host, and we have Lisa Paul Streitfeld with us again. And I think I mispronounced her name, did I?
Streitfeld.
Streitfeld, I want to get it right. And we're doing our third show with us, with her. She is living in Berlin, Germany right now, so we want to do as many shows as we can before she goes back to Germany. Maybe we could have her decide to stay in Connecticut again. Welcome back.
You're certainly making me welcome. Thank you.
We're going to be talking about the age of Aquarius and how it reflects in our culture, and also some of your writing you're doing for the Huffington Post.
Great. I mean, we've talked in our previous segments about, you know, the downside, or being overrun by technology. But my preference is, and what I'm doing for the Huffington Post, I'm doing a revolution series. So the R is in parentheses. So it's revolution, evolution. That's what my healer taught me long ago in Los Angeles. It's no longer revolution, it's evolution, you know. How are we evolving? And I love to put it together, you know. Revolution is evolution. So, you know, I was born into a family. My father was at the forefront of the human potential movement in the 60s. So he actually came to Connecticut because his mentor was Alexander Lowen, who worked with biorhythms.
Oh, okay, that I'm familiar with.
My father was neo-Reichian, so it was that idea. And Reich, if anybody knows, was actually died in jail. He was jailed pretty much for his radical beliefs.
How radical was it?
Yeah, that his beliefs were, and my father continued that. My father followed a guru in the 70s, but I'll go back to the 60s. So he was at the forefront of the human potential movement, and he started a growth center. And we used to go to, when I was a kid, like 5 years old, I was going to encounter groups at these big old estates, you know, Tarrytown House, Wainwright House.
Oh, Wainwright's still very big, yes.
So the one I really remember is when I was told to sit with a little boy and gaze into his eyes, you know, boy my age, like 5, and tell him I loved him with my eyes. Okay, this was the 60s, you remember? And
so people could try this at home if they want.
Yeah, right. And, you know, and then, isn't that funny? Like, sort of intensely, I don't know, sexual for a 5-year-old, but, you know, this was the 60s. So I relate that to, now I can see that was my early experience with the archetype of the Eros Gamos, this idea of merging with other, you know, that where the two become one. And that's alchemy, you know, this idea that of the two become one essence. So that became this lifelong goal. I didn't really understand it. It was the unconscious driving me and this early experience. So that became like this theme of all this literature I was writing in the 80s. But my father started following a guru in the 70s. He actually went to India with him.
Oh, where in India?
I'm not sure. It was Muktananda. I don't know where his ashram was. But he took me to his ashram in New York when I was a teenager. So I was introduced to this mystical thinking pretty young. And so then my experience was, my awakening happened literally over my father's casket when it was another group he got involved with, and he was really proud of this. This is before he died. He was involved with this Raja Yoga. It's the highest form of yoga. And this was a group run entirely by women. And he really, it was on this mountaintop in India that he discovered it, and these women, they were directly to the source. There was no guru anymore. So my father's whole journey was about learning to trust women. He never trusted the feminine or women. And he would say at the end of his life that the only way we're going to have peace in the world is if women run it. So this incredibly powerful woman, her name was Sister Denise. When I was like really distraught over my father's casket, she put her hands up here on my crown, and she opened me up. And I was living in Mexico. I was a reporter in Mexico City, and after having this, it's known as a Kundalini awakening. And my father worked with the Kundalini. Muktananda is probably, along with Yogi Bhajan, who developed Kundalini Yoga, is probably one of the most foremost knowledgeable people on the Kundalini. And my father had done, even after he left the guru, he was doing a lot of research on Kundalini. but it wasn't time to bring this out to the people. And Kundalini is the feminine power, the dark feminine power that, you know, that women then got in touch with in the 80s and the, you know, women's spirituality movement. And now you see rampant in the culture. But again, you don't see too much knowledge attached to it. But that's been my journey. My goal was to bring the Kundalini as a term into the art world and academia. And I did that, like I did a panel I was co-chair for a panel discussion on magic and media in 2012 at the College Art Association, where I interpreted, you know, what's going on in the culture in terms of this acknowledging this dark feminine.
Okay, now how would you, could you give us some examples of our culture where you could show
the vampire, all the vampire franchises, this is totally the dark feminine, okay? That's being projected onto other. And you know, the sucking of energy, the sucking of blood is the sucking of energy. So this whole vampire craze, that's, you know, over the last however many years.
Well, there are certain people, if I'm near them, I do get the feeling I'm exhausted.
Yeah, that's it.
Or when my mother was very ill, when I would go every night, you know, to cook for her and whatever, I would feel tired, but I always felt, I felt like she needed some of my energy, but I would feel really fatigued.
Right, that's, the sick people are very vampiric. But see, the idea is if you know what's going on and you know the dynamic and you know how to recharge yourself, it doesn't have to be a negative thing. But of course, all this media, these films, they also make it you know, they make it, it's very sexual, very intoxicating. They have these gorgeous actors playing vampires. So I don't know how much understanding is coming through, but it's definitely an outlet for the repressed dark feminine. It's been repressed for thousands of years. So.
I think there's one playing right now. I can't think of the title. Right in Bethel here.
Yeah, well, there's an incredible one. Jim Jarmusch wrote this, did this one called "Only Lovers Left Alive." It's
that's it.
it's stunning.
I haven't seen it, and
it is absolutely stunning.
Really?
And they have the names Adam and Eve. So this, to me, has gone further than anything because he's such an artist.
It's currently playing here.
Then that, to me, if you see that movie, that has the new archetype of, you know, it's the goddess and her son lover, because even Tilda Swinton is much older than the actor that's playing her lover.
Oh, and it's
so
funny,
they're totally going back to Sumer in that. She's a Nana. She's stunning, you know.
Oh, now I'll have to see it. There was one movie I read the write-up on it, and I thought, I don't think I want to see that.
Oh no, it's stunning, absolutely stunning. And this idea of blood.
It sounded gory to me.
No, and then the idea of transmitting through the culture, through time, you know, transmitting this kind of higher power and this desire for merging. You know, there's a real connection to the culture in this movie that you don't find in the more popular fare.
Now, is this something that you did as a critic too, like for movies? Would you?
Actually, I wrote that into my dissertation, that film, which I didn't do. I was about to do it for Huffington Post, but I didn't. So maybe I still will. I wanted to do it into a paper more than, but that's what I do for Huffington Post. I'm always looking for that, in this Revolution series, I'm looking for the new forms of this archetype. They can take so many different forms. What you're seeing in the music industry is this kind of typical occult symbols that are not original. I mean, you know, you see Madonna as Ishtar at the Super Bowl. You're seeing Beyonce with her dark, you know, sacred prostitute, whatever she calls her. I can't remember. She has a name for her, the dark feminine. But and then there's a lot of occult imagery going on in the pop music.
Now, are they aware of it, or is it like an unconscious thing? You don't know.
I don't know. You know, you read on the internet, it's a whole conspiracy, and this is mind control and slave, but I mean, I don't know. I mean, you know, as an astrologer, I see it a lot as Saturn. They're not conscious, and they're not doing their Saturn, so it comes off as that they're being slaves. You know, so if you look at it at that level, as an astrologer would. But then on the internet, the whole conspiracy theory is it's you know, Illuminati, it's the slavery, and, you know. So I don't know. I mean,
do you think there's some truth to the conspiracy theories?
I'm starting to think so. I mean, when I was flying back, I pick up the cover of Time magazine, International Time, and I see Beyonce is the most influential woman in the world.
That's hard to believe.
That is hard to believe.
Yes.
So and then of course, and somebody was saying to me on the plane or something, oh, she's mind controlled. So, you know, you know, it's starting to be very overt. So you think that it must be going on. So I don't know. But I would still say, if you're doing the inner work, you conquer your Saturn, you don't need to get caught up in that. So we have to always keep that balance.
Can you explain for our audience what you would mean by conquering your Saturn?
Well, in astrology, Saturn is the devil. I mean, Saturn is the dark, your shadow, what everybody sees that you don't see. So your task in life is to become conscious of your Saturn, whatever it is, you know, and wherever it's placed. That's the art of astrology, to be able to read where the Saturn is and where this devil is in you, you know.
That's kind of a Liz Green type
Yeah,
thing.
exactly. Well,
Yeah,
that
okay.
Liz Green's book, what's it called? Saturn, I can't remember the title.
I can't either,
but
yes.
She's the definitive source for Saturn.
If anybody would Google Liz Green, though, they would come up with that book.
The old devil, something about
Yes.
New look at the old devil, right? So yeah, that's a classic in astrology. So yeah, I mean, you know, I don't know. It's synchronistic, if nothing else, that this whole Illuminati's conspiracy theory is coming up at the same time as we enter the Aquarian age, where Saturn is one of the rulers of Aquarius. You can't do Uranus. You can't go out and be the revolutionary until you pay your bills. You know, you can't.
Right. Yes.
You can't have the freedom of having a car if you don't pay your parking tickets. You know, it comes on the very practical daily basis. I mean, when I was doing my heavy work in the occult in Los Angeles in the 80s, I mean, if I got one parking ticket, I would just be devastated. That would be a sign that my Saturn is not being obeyed, and that, you know, that's just a sign of further trouble to come. So you really have to pay attention
That's interesting, because sometimes you can be driving, you have somewhere to go, and there'll be a slow car or something pulls in front of you, and you can't. And I always think it's almost like you feel, well, I want to get out of here fast, and I'm always thinking, no, there's something to be learned. There's a reason I need to slow down.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, always looking at external signs and seeing them as part of your internal process. And once you do that, you know, you go through life with much more pleasure and participation, and it's actually, we all become performance artists, really, where the performance is to master our personality.
Right. People that haven't studied astrology, this probably sounds crazy, and I remember hearing people talk about Jupiter and Saturn and thinking, what a bunch of lunatics.
Yeah, right.
And then when you get into it and you start studying, you think, oh, gee, there really is something to this.
It never ends. And, you know, then there's new planets being discovered.
And
so
asteroids,
you know, the new planet, Eris, right?
And there's many others.
Yeah.
And centaurs.
But the one that's really was acknowledged by, I forgot his name now, the astronomer who discovered her. Maybe she should have been Persephone, but we already had a Persephone as an asteroid. And I guess this new planet maybe instead of full planet, because it's now Pluto's been demoted, and you know.
We still use it as astrologers, though. And
yeah,
very
of
rightly
course.
so.
Pluto's ever powerful, no matter if it's demoted or not.
Yeah.
Right? So this planet. So I've been reading about this interpretations of this new planet, Eris, and how, you know, this seems to be an energy that I've been enacting and seeking, certainly in women in the art world. And here again, I never really knew about what this new planet, only recently when I learned what her name was, that she had a female name, and that what characteristics she had. And here, this is what I've been pulling up. So that's the correspondence that we're, you know,
And you yourself are an Aquarian, born Aquarius.
But I didn't realize how much I was driven by this new planet, you know.
But that would be typical that you're ahead of your time.
Yeah,
We think of the Aquarians always seem like they're a little offbeat and whatever, because what they are studying and doing, it's years later that everybody's more familiar with it and it's more acceptable.
Yeah,
in general.
except that I can't accept that anymore because of the state of the planet. It's like, we're going to wake up by now or not, It was Jose Arguelles. That wasn't his real name, by the way. He was an American who took a Mexican name, maybe because he's the one who brought out this whole mythology of the Mayan calendar ending. Mm-hmm. And he created, the harmonic convergence in 1987. He was Aquarius. So that was like it was a global performance piece, really. Mm-hmm. The new, internet was fairly new then. And that was a worldwide meditation, and that was the idea to wake up. I mean, think how long ago that was now.
And we also have Neptune in Pisces, probably, I think it's been in maybe 2 years, so it has at least another 12 years. So what you're doing is also not only the Uranus and Aquarius, but it's bringing in the Neptune and Pisces, which it rules, which I think is interesting. It rules that it brings, and what I'm finding interesting, a lot of schools, public schools, because of financial constrictions, they're shortening their music programs or eliminating them. But interestingly enough, I see private music schools opening up for very young children, even pre-kindergarten. But then it becomes like, well, if a family doesn't have the money or the time, their children aren't going to go to that. But with the age of Aquarius and the Neptune and Pisces, you've been looking at music and artwork. So what do you see with the combination of Neptune there with Uranus?
First of all, I mean, music is the highest form of art. Actually, it's the hardest thing to write about, and that's about the least thing I write about. Uh-huh. So, because it's ruled by Neptune, it's very intangible, they say it's the highest form of art. But also, that's a good point, that Neptune and
Pisces.
Neptune and Pisces is about the myth, about what is the myth. And it's confusing because it's in Pisces, but it's not the Pisces myth anymore, it's the Aquarian myth.
Oh,
so, that's what even confuses us astrologers. So,
And our Grand Cross that we had of the Grand Square
the cardinal
was pulling these planets in, the Uranus, the Mars, the Pluto, the Jupiter.
We don't know yet, though. I mean, Mars still has to go direct, right, in a couple of weeks. And then, so it's a really crucial time. I would say the Cardinal Cross is about action. I mean, whatever we've been, certainly it has been for me. I mean, what brought me back to this country.
What did bring you back here?
Well, I think the Cardinal Cross, if you want to talk astrology, because I was living in the unconscious there. Most of my writing, I would say all of it takes place in the unconscious. And then I was balancing it by taking German, which really requires the logical mind. And it was like making me crazy. But it was a balance there. And then the Cardinal Cross is action. It's certainly pulled me out of the state of merging with the unconscious. So if I could transmit my personal situation to what you're asking about Neptune and Pisces, I would say it's about living the myth or it becoming into the collective consciousness because of that cross. And, you're seeing it with celebrities. I'm seeing it. And also Lilith has now changed signs to Leo, which is interesting because that would be the opposite. That's the opposite Aquarius in the shadow. So there's celebrities I track that I'm interested in, especially the ones with Leo, because the U.S. nodes are in Leo. The North Node is in early Leo. And
Jupiter will be going in soon.
And exactly.
Yes.
So this is why we look at celebrities, right? Us astrologers love to look at celebrities. Well, also because they're living now,
People know who they are. If we
that's
did a French
one.
chart, they wouldn't know the person.
But also they're living out their dharma, whatever it is, for better or worse, in a very public way. And that's what a lot we say shows astrology works, is by looking at the behavior of celebrities, right? So I'm interested now in Lilith triggering that North Node of the U.S. chart, and then Jupiter going over it.
So what do you think?
That'll be in July.
What would you predict about that? Do you have any predictions, or are you just waiting to see?
Well, I'd like to see if the U.S., according to its chart, is the country where this archetype's going to be manifested, because we have an Aquarian moon in the U.S. chart, and also this nodal oppositions, Aquarius in the South Node and Leo in the North Node. I see that as that balance I'm talking about, that archetype. So to see that myth being played out in the celebrity culture that's what I'm looking at right now.
And when I think back to like the 50s, it seemed like there, in general, this is just my unconscious perception of it, that it seemed like there were a lot of women, they were actresses, and of course they had their contracts. It seems now the more popular ones are male, unless it's just my perception.
Yeah.
I mean, there are both male and female actors and actresses.
I think the structure's broken down in a way, and what's interesting to me is these male actors don't want to play the romantic roles, so there's less of those movies.
Yes.
Or maybe they think there's no audience for that, I don't know. And then the technology, of course, all these digitally generated fare. So you don't have this kind of whole category of romantic comedy. I mean, romantic comedy or romances that women actresses, right? I mean, well, but that's a problem. That's another problem, that women aren't really being their own protagonists. And why is that happening? You know, that's another whole problem. But that's why I needed to go back to Germany and find the archaeology for where the feminine got left out. I mean, the thing is, you know, the feminists, you could say, I mean, they were brought in equality, but it was really most in the political and social sense. And then, of course, you know, the European attitude certainly is that they gave up their femininity in doing it. So to go back and find the femininity, you go back to Europe where they didn't have a feminist revolution. And, you know, that's sort of where we're at. Like, why, with all the gains of the feminists, are we now in a place where women are still stuck in those roles? I mean, why aren't we seeing more empowered roles in cinema?
I'm a lot older than you, and I remember when I was in elementary school, we had the Weekly Reader, and it would show the things wrong with Russia and communists, and women were sweeping the inside of streetcars, that women were out working. Now, my father became ill when I was young, so my mother went to work. And I was ahead of the time. I would be more like the children being raised today, because the American home, traditionally, then women stayed home and they raised the family. The father supplied the income for the home, and there were more definite roles to be played. And, you know, when the feminist movement came along and other things, and women looking for equality, other types of jobs and professions opened up, so our whole culture has changed. Now, you have the advantage of being born and living in the U.S. and other countries. You're in Germany. What would you say would be a good contrast about looking at women in the U.S. right now versus if you're looking at women living in Germany and the family structure?
I'm in Berlin, so that's pretty exceptional. But I was just commenting on Facebook, I think they're way far ahead, which is ironic, because they didn't have feminism in the academy the way they had it here. So it's pretty ironic, right? With all the gains.
How are they ahead of us in what respect?
Well, if you just look at posters of the EEC elections, you see, it's like amazing. You see women and men, and you know, I mean, there's a woman president in Germany. I mean, so it's right there. It's in the politics.
Well, even India had Indira Gandhi, and Pakistan had, tip of my tongue. She was assassinated.
Bhutto.
Begins with Buddha, not
Bhutto.
Benazir Bhutto. Benazir Bhutto, you're right.
But that, again, don't forget, a lot of that comes from the father connection. You know, the myth of Athena, you know, the coming out of the father's
But still,
head.
we think of those countries as being anti-women so much.
I know, but
especially Pakistan.
I think that's exceptional, because so much of it is just the family lineage and the caste. You know, it trumps over gender in that sense. But Germany, yeah, it surprises me. Well, especially Berlin. Berlin has such a history of the strong, free woman. that it's really embedded there.
Oh, I
And
didn't know that.
yeah, well, the Weimar film was very much showed very strong, independent women, and so there was this kind of archetype. I've been writing about that. An archetype established there. It was a particular woman that was really the model for that. Her name was Lou Andreas Salome, and I've written a lot about her. She was Nietzsche's model for the Übermensch. So we go back to our first segment where that's the topic of my dissertation, and I really write a lot about her and how he projected this inner figure onto her. And she was Aquarius, by the way. Mm-hmm. So she really was that far ahead of her time, that she brought this independent, but a really feminine independence. And feminists, I never understood why feminists in this country never acknowledged her. But I think they just sort of saw her as, you know, a goddess figure that was just singularly exceptional and had nothing really to offer
I think we're
all
rather
women.
insular, and we don't look to other countries that often.
Well, that could be, but even in Germany, you know, but only recently, because now, you know.
Oh, we only have 1 minute. Huffington Post. You
Wow.
want to talk about that quickly in 1 minute?
The what?
Huffington Post.
Oh, well, you know, speaking of women, it was started by Arianna Huffington, and somehow I don't know if an American woman could have done that. Because American women, I think, American women in a certain segment, you know, at a certain level of class, think the battle's been won or something. And the fact that she started that, nobody would have thought of that, to create blogs, nobody's paid. But the truth is, that's where I really find my mouthpiece, where I can really say what I want and not feel any kind of censorship.
Well, you can always come on Practical Talk Time to
That's
say what
true.
you want. Thank you.
You're right about that. Right
We're
up there
so
with
glad to have
Ariana,
had you
know?
back. And to our audience, we say thank you for watching. And again, if you have questions for Lisa, please email us at practicaltalktime@yahoo.com. Thank you. I can't believe I went by